I did want to move just for a moment. We'll get back to the polls. Some of the work the ACLJ is doing. You may have seen in the break if you're watching on YouTube or Rumble, the work that we are doing right now, actively supporting pro-life groups. You've heard about this, whether what we're doing in Massachusetts or now what we're doing to combat the labeling of pro-life groups within the U.S. Army as terrorist organizations. You're talking about kind of the mainstream pro-life groups with Operation Rescue. Will, why don't you give us a little brief background? We can hear a clip, and then CeCe Hiles joining us in studio to really break it down.
That's right. We learned about this several weeks ago, that there was a training presentation used on counterterrorism threats. This was at Fort Liberty, formerly Fort Bragg in North Carolina. And this slide specifically talked about, under terrorist groups, was talking about organizations like Operation Rescue or National Right to Life, or if you had a Choose Life license plate for your state, and that the activities of these groups were things like sidewalk counseling.
Yeah, if you're watching right now, this is the screenshot that someone took and leaked of this sort of PowerPoint style presentation. And again, you can see terrorist groups at the top, National Right to Life, Operation Rescue, and of course, that pro-life license plate, which I don't know if you've met most people with the pro-life license plate. They're not exactly the most hostile group, typically.
Right. Yeah, and so we saw this report. We jumped on it immediately. We've had a long relationship with Troy Newman and Operation Rescue from the founding of ACLJ, and we represent Operation Rescue in this as we're trying to get to the bottom of and see what we can do to push back against the military labeling pro-life groups or even pro-life individuals as potential domestic terrorists. And there is good movement on this. And one thing is that members of Congress have also noticed this. And this is a clip from a hearing at the House Armed Services Committee just at the end of last week. It didn't get a lot of news. This isn't something that's going to make headlines everywhere, but it's important for you to hear. This is Chairman Jim Banks of that committee talking to Lieutenant General Patrick Matlock from the Department of Defense. Let's go ahead and play bite 2.
So the follow-up to that is, has anyone been held accountable for it? This is the United States Army. This is a training that went on since 2017. You're acknowledging that y'all missed it. Any accountability at all?
Chairman Banks, in the conduct of the investigation after it was completed, the commander directed corrective actions which have all been completed.
But accountability, you're the United States Army. Has anyone been held accountable for that?
The commander further delegated responsibility for any additional actions to the garrison commander.
How about the soldier who created the training to begin with? Has he been held accountable?
The individual who created the training has received corrective training, has been retrained as a trainer, and continues to perform.
Corrective training, but accountability.
Mr. Chairman, I'm not going to talk about specific accountability actions because those actions reside
Why not?
With the chain.
You're the United States Army. No, and you're acknowledging that mistakes were made, but has anyone been held accountable for that mistake?
Again, Chairman, I'm not going to describe specific actions taken because those actions reside with the chain of command, and it's our policy not to discuss those.
Yeah. So action taking place. CeCe, I want to get your response to that and also what the ACLJ is doing.
So I'm going to interpret that as no accountability has happened for that. And further on in that hearing, what is also disconcerting is that he basically said, according to Representative Mills, that they have no idea whether it's going on at other bases or locations in the Army, and they have no idea whether it's continuing now or not. But what we do know is that at least 10,000 soldiers at Fort Liberty received this training that says if you are pro-life, basically just a general swath of if you are pro-life, if you believe in the sanctity of life, if you engage in sidewalk counseling, if you have a Choose Life, license plate, that you are a terrorist. That is what they are calling you, a terrorist. And our military is being trained on this. And yet when we have a hearing and you have the Army's Deputy Chief of Staff sitting there and testifying, he cannot say that any corrective action, that anybody's been held accountable for this, only that there has been so-called corrective action taken and retrained. There needs to be accountability for what is going on. The fact that they have literally, and I said this before, about half of Americans say that they are pro-life. For the DOD, the Department of Defense, and the Army to be training these people, that half of Americans are terrorists because we believe in the sanctity of life is atrocious.
Yeah, we found out about it just because of that leaked image that came out, and this has been going on for years. So it took someone brave enough to finally take a picture, leak it out, and say, this is what's happening here, because if not, we would have never known. And it was going on, like I said, for years and years and years. And of course, one of the big labels is Operation Rescue, and we're representing them.
Right. And the whistleblower has said after he brought this to everyone's attention, he's had calls from bases all over the country saying, yes, they did receive the same kind of training. So hopefully our FOIA that we filed immediately when we got news of this will help uncover really what's going on in the military.
And you can understand, there's a chain of command. They don't want to speak up. They don't want to cause a ruckus related to this, especially if it's not an issue that they're willing to, sacrifice for, because there could be also a very big negative reaction from the U.S. Army if you bring this stuff up. But someone took the right way to go at it.
That's right. And as we mentioned before, we are representing Operation Rescue. We've already sent a FOIA and also a demand letter to the base to try to get more information and to get them to stop using this. As far as we know, that this training, and as the military brass that spoke at the hearing on late last week have mentioned that they are no longer using it. Yep. The problem is we don't know where else something like this is being used and how there is a continued targeting of pro-life Americans at a time, one, where it's a very big issue in our country, where we know that the real targets of terroristic activity many times are crisis pregnancy or pregnancy resource centers. We've seen that in the aftermath of Roe v. Wade being overturned. And really, the audacity that the Army would label them as domestic terrorists has to be stopped.
Quickly, though, CC, we only have a minute here. The FOIA situation, which is the Freedom of Information Act request, why is that important, and what is that for people that don't know? We kind of just spit it out because we hear it all the time. But people probably are just being exposed to this concept.
Yeah, Freedom of Information requests, we have the right to get the information that is spoken and through emails or any kind of memos in our government. And so we are able to request what was going on, what's the background. We want to know who was talking to who, where did this come from, and we'll get that from the FOIA request.
Yeah, there actually will be some transparency. Now, sometimes that takes a long time and it takes a lot of work. And that's why our ACLJ team is on it. I'm going to encourage you, go to ACLJ.org, become an ACLJ champion today, whether that's supporting our incredible crew here who puts on this broadcast or it's supporting our fights and our efforts in the law.